Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to walk through a world where the line between man and God was almost invisible? A place where a simple sunrise wasn't just the start of another day, but a divine event, watched and recorded by priests who believed the sun itself was a god sailing through the heavens. Where death wasn't feared, it was mastered, mapped out, prepared for like an adventure beyond the stars. That world existed, and its name was Egypt. You're about to enter a civilization that defies logic, challenges modern thinking, and whispers secrets from thousands of years ago. This is not just history, it's identity. It's human potential stretched to its absolute limit. Because the Egyptians didn't just build pyramids. They built purpose, legacy, systems of belief so powerful, people would spend their entire lives preparing for a world they couldn't see. And yet, the deeper we look, the more we realize they may have known something we've forgotten. So here's your chance. Step into the sand. Let the stones speak. Because in the story of Egypt, you're not just a spectator. You're a seeker, a soul drawn to the truth. And once the gods begin to speak, nothing will ever feel the same again. Now go ahead and press red subscribe button and turn on notifications for more interesting stories. Close your eyes for a second and imagine standing on the banks of a great river. Not just any river, but a ribbon of life cutting through a deadly desert. To your left, golden dunes stretch endlessly. To your right, date palms sway gently above fertile soil. And at your feet, the Nile murmurs, quietly feeding the first heartbeat of a civilization destined to change the world. Before pyramids, before pharaohs, before history even had a name, Egypt was nothing more than a scattered collection of small tribes. Fishermen, farmers, potters, ordinary people surviving an extraordinary landscape. But something was different here. The Nile didn't just bring water, it brought rhythm, predictability. Every year, without fail, it would rise and fall, leaving behind rich black soil that could grow anything. This miracle didn't just feed them, it shaped their worldview. To the early Egyptians, the Nile wasn't a river. It was a god, and that sense of divine order would become the foundation of their entire society. Now imagine those scattered villages beginning to grow, closer to the river, closer to each other, and closer to something bigger than survival. A new idea was forming. What if the land had one ruler? What if order, Ma'at, could be embodied in a single person? That person was Narmer, also known as Menes, the first pharaoh, a man who did what no one else had done before. He united the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, around 3100 BCE. Think about that. One man, in an age with no phones, no roads, no maps, brought together an entire civilization. Not just with swords, but with symbols. The double crown, the royal palette. These were not just political tools. They were psychological weapons, designed to show the people that unity wasn't a threat, it was destiny. And here's the powerful truth. Every pharaoh who came after Narmer wouldn't just claim political power, they would claim divine right. They were living gods. Can you feel the shift? In just a few generations, Egypt went from a land of tribes to a land of temples, tombs, and thrones. The concept of rulership became sacred, not because of control, but because of cosmic balance. The pharaoh wasn't just keeping order, he was the order. And that, right there, is your first glimpse into the Egyptian mindset. To them, life wasn't random. Everything, from the flood of the Nile to the alignment of the stars, had meaning. And their leader stood at the center of it all. But let's go even deeper. This early unification created a psychological contract, one that would echo for 3,000 years. If the people obeyed, they would be protected. If the pharaoh upheld Ma'at, the gods would bless them. But if the balance was broken, chaos would return. Now ask yourself, do we still believe in that kind of order today? In a world spinning faster than ever, Egypt reminds us of something primal. The humans crave meaning. We crave structure, rhythm, identity. And the Egyptians were among the first to give it a face. A king, a crown, a purpose. So when you look at the ancient symbols carved into those walls, remember, They weren't just writing history. They were writing who they were. And that's where it all began. Not with pyramids, but with an idea that unity could create eternity. Let's take a walk through time, but not as tourists. Step into the white heat of the Egyptian sun, where shadows stretch long against the sand. And ahead of you, rising like a riddle carved into the earth, is a pyramid. Not just a pile of stones, not a tomb, not a monument, but a message sent through time. The age of the pyramids, also called the Old Kingdom, began around 2686 BCE, and with it came a transformation so radical, so ambitious, that it defies everything we know about the ancient world. Here's the thing. The Egyptians didn't build pyramids because they could. They built them because they had to. In their world, the pharaoh wasn't just a ruler. He was divine, a god incarnate. When he died, his soul didn't vanish. It ascended, joined the stars, and became one with the gods. But only if the path was prepared. And the pyramid? That was the staircase to the stars. It began with Djoser, the first king to build in stone. His architect, Imhotep, created the step pyramid at Saqqara, the first large-scale cut-stone structure in history. A marvel of architecture, yes. But more than that, a declaration of belief. These weren't buildings. They were resurrection engines. Now fast forward to the 4th dynasty, and suddenly, ambition explodes. Khufu, also known as Cheops, orders the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza, 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing up to 80 tons, aligned with the stars, the sun, and the cardinal directions. No cement, no machinery, just knowledge, will, and thousands of devoted workers. Let that sink in. Before the wheel was common, they built a structure so precise that modern engineers still argue about how. But here's what really matters. They didn't do it for money or for glory. They did it because they believed deeply that life was only part of the story. Death wasn't an end. It was a gateway. The pyramid was the pharaoh's way of preparing his soul for eternity. And in return, the people believed he would protect them, even in the afterlife. This wasn't slavery. Most evidence suggests that pyramid builders were skilled workers, respected, fed, and housed in planned communities. They left behind graffiti, songs, and symbols. They were building not just for a king, but for a cosmic order. You see, for the Egyptians, building something that could outlast death was the ultimate act of faith. Contrast that with today. We build for convenience. They built for eternity. But there's a deeper psychological truth here. These massive structures weren't just expressions of power. They were tools of identity shifting. Imagine waking up every morning to see the Great Pyramid rising on the horizon, telling you that your life, your death, your soul mattered, that you were part of something grand, something forever. And maybe that's why we still stand in awe of them, because deep down, we all crave that same meaning, that same connection to something timeless. The Egyptians didn't just build monuments. They built purpose into stone. And as the sun set each night behind the golden limestone, the people believed the pharaoh's soul had joined the sky. Order was safe. Life could continue. Now the stones still stand, not because of how they were stacked, but because of why. So the next time someone says ancient, people were primitive, remember this. They didn't leave behind skyscrapers. They left behind eternity. Let me ask you something. What if the people we call rulers weren't just politicians, but portals? Portals between the seen and the unseen, between the world we know and the realm of the gods. That was the pharaoh. To the ancient Egyptians, he wasn't just the man in charge. He was the axis of the universe, the living bridge between the heavens and the earth. When he breathed, the land flourished. When he died, the stars shifted. But where did this power come from? It wasn't just birthright. It was secrecy, because the greatest strength of the pharaoh was not his army. It was what the people didn't know. Let's peel back the golden curtain. Every pharaoh was carefully constructed, not just born. From childhood, he was immersed in rituals, astronomy, language, and sacred geometry. Every gesture, every robe, every ceremony was designed to transform him into a god. By the time he was crowned, he didn't just believe in his divinity, the people did too. That belief wasn't blind. It was engineered. Identity shifting at the highest level. And it worked because it created unshakable loyalty. Why obey a king when you can worship one? Every 30 years, the pharaoh had to prove his divinity through the Sed festival, a sacred renewal ceremony hidden from the public. He would symbolically die and be reborn before the gods, regaining his divine energy. Only the inner circle witnessed it. And afterward, the pharaoh emerged, not older, but more eternal. This psychological anchor kept the people convinced their ruler was beyond time. You've heard of pyramids and tombs, but did you know many were designed not just to house a body, but to confuse, protect, and guard secrets? In the Valley of the Kings, tunnels twisted in deliberate misdirection. False doors, hidden rooms, decoy sarcophagi, not just to trick grave robbers, but to protect what was truly inside: knowledge. The walls weren't just decorated. They were encoded. Stars, spells, stories of the underworld, maps for the soul's journey. Only the initiated, high priests, royal scribes, could read these texts. The Book of the Dead, Amduat, Book of Gates. These weren't fairy tales. They were manuals for immortality. Can you feel it? That blend of sacred psychology and engineered mystery? The Egyptians weren't hiding gold. They were hiding power, and maybe they still are. In 1922, when Howard Carter opened King Tutankhamun's tomb, he unleashed not just global fascination, but a series of strange deaths. His financier, Lord Carnarvon, died suddenly of blood poisoning. Other team members followed. Lights flickered. Radios failed. The media called it the curse of the pharaohs. Was it real? Or was it belief that made it so? Here's the real secret. The Egyptians knew how powerful belief could be. They crafted rituals that blurred the line between fear and faith, not just to protect the dead, but to control the living. And in doing so, they created a civilization that didn't just tell stories. It became one. The pharaoh was the mirror. Here's what they understood that most societies still don't. The ruler reflects the soul of the people. If the pharaoh is divine, then so are you. If he can rise after death, so can you. If he can speak with gods, maybe you were never meant to be ordinary. That's the real psychological trigger of Egypt. Not fear of power, but empowerment through mystery. And maybe, just maybe, that's why their secrets still whisper through the sand. Because part of us doesn't want the answers. We want the wonder. Let me tell you something we often forget. Even the greatest civilizations fall. And Egypt, mighty Egypt, was no exception. After the age of the pyramids and the golden god kings, something unthinkable happened. The order broke. The old kingdom collapsed. Not with fire, not with war, but with something far more terrifying: silence. The Nile failed to flood. Crops withered. Famines swept across the land. And the divine contract the Egyptians believed in between people, pharaoh, and gods fell shattered. Pharaohs lost power. Local warlords rose. Cities turned inward, selfish. Fear replaced faith. For over a century, Egypt plunged into what we now call the First Intermediate Period, a time of darkness. But here's what's remarkable. They didn't vanish. They rebuilt. Because the Egyptians believed in something stronger than fear: Ma'at, the balance of life. They believed that even chaos had a cycle. That even when the gods seemed silent, they were only testing them. And from that test, a new leader emerged: Mentuhotep II, a name most people have never heard. But make no mistake, he was a king of resurrection. From his base in Thebes, Mentuhotep reunified the fractured lands, restored temples, restarted trade routes, and rebuilt belief in divine kingship. Under his rule, Egypt entered a new age, one of quiet brilliance, the Middle Kingdom. This wasn't an age of massive pyramids or grand displays. This was an age of wisdom. While the Old Kingdom focused on the physical, bricks, tombs, gold, the Middle Kingdom focused inward. This is when we see the rise of Egyptian literature, wisdom texts written for the soul. Books like the Instructions of Ptahhotep taught morality, leadership, and emotional intelligence. Not through fear, but through humility. Don't be proud of your knowledge. One passage says, consult the ignorant as well as the wise. Let that sink in. A 4,000-year-old quote that could outshine half the corporate leadership books of today. They also advanced. This wasn't just a rebuilding of cities. It was a rebuilding of identity. Under kings like Senusret III, Egypt extended its borders, launched expeditions into Nubia, and traded with far-off lands like Punt, a mysterious region full of incense, gold, and exotic animals. Irrigation, building canals and dikes to control the unpredictable Nile. The people no longer waited for the gods to act. They worked with nature, using knowledge and effort to restore harmony. It was a quiet brilliance, the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but endures. Another quiet shift happened here, and it's subtle but huge. In the Old Kingdom, only the pharaoh had access to the afterlife. But now, the common Egyptian began to believe their soul mattered too. Tombs and coffins for everyday people began featuring the Book of the Dead, spelled for the journey into the next world. This was psychological empowerment. The Egyptians began to see themselves not just as followers, but as participants in the cosmic story. Why it matters for us. Sometimes we glamorize strength. We think empires are built by unbroken power. But Egypt's greatest power wasn't its monuments. It was its resilience. They faced starvation, division, spiritual crisis, and they rebuilt. Stronger, wiser, quieter. Isn't that something we need now more than ever? Because maybe the Middle Kingdom is telling us this. Yes, you can fall, but you can rise again, not by being who you were before, but by becoming who you were meant to be. Picture this. The sun rises over a kingdom reborn, not fragile or recovering, but radiant. Temples gleam in gold leaf. Columns soar skyward like papyrus stalks. Trumpets blare. Priests chant. And in the distance, a chariot kicks up dust, its rider cloaked in jewels, eyes locked on eternity. Welcome to the new kingdom, the height of Egypt's power, influence, and spiritual conviction. If the Old Kingdom built foundations, and the Middle Kingdom rebuilt belief, the New Kingdom did something more dangerous. It amplified ambition. This was the age of the warrior pharaohs. Take Thutmose III, a tactical genius who expanded Egypt's borders to their greatest reach. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a scholar, keeping records of his victories like journals for the gods. But even more remarkable was Hatshepsut, Egypt's first great female pharaoh. She didn't rule as a queen beside a king. She became the king. She wore the ceremonial beard. She stood alone in statues. She launched massive trade expeditions and built one of Egypt's most beautiful temples at Deir el-Bahari. Her reign was peaceful, prosperous, and quietly revolutionary. Now think about this. In a world ruled by men, she made herself divine. Not by force, but by vision. She didn't demand obedience. She commanded belief. That's power. Then came a crack in the golden mask. Pharaoh Akhenaten. He saw the world differently and demanded everyone else did too. He erased the old gods, banned temples, and worshipped one god only, Aten, the sun disk. He moved the capital, changed the art, made it more raw, more human. He even portrayed himself with an elongated skull and swollen belly, breaking every artistic tradition before him. Was it madness or divine insight? Either way, it didn't last. After his death, the priests erased his name, smashed his statues, and restored the old gods. But the shockwave he caused still echoes today, because Akhenaten challenged not just theology, but control. He proved that belief could be reshaped, reimagined, and feared. In the wake of Akhenaten's chaos rose a child, Tutankhamun, crowned at just 9, dead by 19, forgotten for centuries. Until 1922, Howard Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb wasn't just archaeological, it was emotional. His golden mask, his untouched chamber, it reawakened the world's obsession with ancient Egypt. But here's the deeper story. Tut wasn't just a boy king. He was a symbol of return, of the old ways restored, of balance coming back. His tomb, though modest by royal standards, held a secret treasure, our connection to a lost world. And that's why his story lives on, not because of what he ruled, but because of what he represents. The fragility of legacy. Then came Ramesses II, the last of the truly great pharaohs. He ruled for 66 years, fought in the Battle of Kadesh, signed one of the first known peace treaties, built monuments so vast they seem fictional, like Abu Simbel, carved into a mountainside with statues the height of buildings. He wasn't just remembered. He planned to be remembered. He filled the land with his name, literally etched it into history. And it worked. Even today, when people think of Pharaoh, they see his face. But even gods fade. And after Ramesses, Egypt began to fracture once again. Power thinned. Invasions increased. The divine light dimmed. Let's pause. That's it for this video. In the next video, we will discuss about life in the shadow of the gods and why Egyptians build pyramids. This entire age, the conquests, the temples, the divine proclamations, it wasn't just about ego. It was about control through belief. When people believe their ruler is chosen by the gods, even as a god, they'll endure anything, fight for anything, build anything. But belief is fragile. And when it breaks, empires break with it. The new kingdom burned bright, brighter than any before it. But that light casts long shadows. And as we step forward into the fall of Egypt, we're not just witnessing history. We're watching a mirror of how every empire, every ideology, every identity must eventually face the truth. Nothing built by humans is immune to time.